Oh, well, fantastic. Welcome back to the team room, everybody. Some technical difficulties aside and some intense editing for Jared to figure out when it is we stop BSing during this morning. But I want to say welcome back. Thanks. This is the Ones Ready team room. You got the whole team here. You've got Lyle Rosin from Project One Vet at a Time, and we're going to get into his story in a second. And most importantly, the important work that he's doing with Project One Vet at a Time. Hi, it's me. I'm an alumni. I'm a family member. So, I'm not just a client. I'm the president, I think is what I'm supposed to say now. But we just want to start off as always. Hey, like us, subscribe to us, figure out where it is that we are on whatever platform, leave us a review. It really does help. It puts us at the top of the charts. It shows that we're moving upwards because we want to get the information out there. So when we talk about great organizations like POVAT, somebody actually hears it, because a podcast is awesome. But if you're in your own room talking to yourself, that's not really a podcast. So we got to share it and we got to make the stuff grow. So we really appreciate it if you did. Other than that, with that out of the way, Lyle, welcome to the team room. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you guys for having me. Like I said, it's great seeing faces, putting faces with names. As a program director, I get to see a lot of names, but very rarely do I get to talk to the three folks that Project One Vet at a Time is helping out. So it's pretty cool, pretty unique experience for me, and I appreciate the invite. And hopefully I can be somewhat interesting because I've watched a lot of your podcasts and you have some quite dynamic characters on there. And it is a great podcast. So I'm pleased and thrilled to be a part of it. So thank you all.
Some of those dynamic characters are also the hosts.
Yeah. Much to everybody's chagrin, actually. So Lyle, take us back. Tell us a little bit about yourself. So we definitely want to dive deep into Project One Vet at a Time and stuff. But obviously we talk about people's lives and people's journeys and how they got to where they are. So take us through yours. Right. Take us back to a young Lyle Rosin that didn't know what he wanted to do as 18 years old. Where did you go from there?
Sure. So I grew up in a really small farming community in Gaylord, Minnesota. It's about 1,800 people. We used to have a couple of stoplights. It's now turned all into stop signs. So there's not much out there than open fields and farmland. So, but I spent 18 years in Gaylord, graduated from there, tried to go to school afterwards for about a year, decided that wasn't really for me. And then, my sister had gone to and spent about 6 years in the Air Force, probably about 10 years before I graduated. So it was something that kind of always interested me. And honestly, I needed a steady paycheck for some of the things that I was going through. So the Air Force was like, we can recruit you. And I certainly said yes and joined way back in 1989. So that was a long time ago. I know that's a long time. I'm an old man.
Nobody say how old they were. I know we're all thinking it. Nobody say how old you were in 1989.
Sure. I already know because, like I said, you guys are clients, and I know how young you are. So again, it was a long time ago, but 1989 was a different time period. I came in the Air Force as a aircraft weapons maintainer. So I was working on the F-15 aircraft for about 8.5 years, putting missiles and bullets on that aircraft and letting them go do their thing. At about the 8-year mark, I met my current wife, Amy Rosin, who was also in the Air Force. We were both senior airmen stationed at Kadena in Okinawa, Japan. And she was like, weapons maintenance, that's a good career field. It's pretty cool. You hang out with some pretty cool people. You guys like to party pretty hard. But what are you going to do when you get out? And I'm like, what if I never get out? What if this is just what I am? And she's like, nah, I think maybe you need a skill, something else to do other than load bags for Delta, because that's all a weapons loader is probably good for. So she was in the personnel career field, so human resources were kind of her realm. And she claims me as her first cross trainee. So as a senior airman, again, stationed in Okinawa, met her in 95, got married in 96. 2 months after we got married, she's a South Florida girl. I'm from Minnesota. I wanted to, really impress her with what I could do for a honeymoon. So 2 months after we got married, we both went to Prince Sultan Air Base, the vast expanse of a beach, the most sand I could find,
Right.
middle of Saudi Arabia. It was like, okay, this is where we're going to spend our 4-month honeymoon. You in your tent, me in my tent. And that really grows a relationship when you cannot have the visits you'd like to have as a newlywed couple.
Right.
But you do a lot of talking, you play a lot of cards, it was an interesting time, but we had a good 4 months in the desert, and then that was that, and that was pretty much the highlight of my weapons career was actually meeting Amy and having her talk me into cross training into something that was a skill position.
That's fantastic. And then what skill position did you actually cross train into?
So I had a number that I looked at, but at the time I was working at the Airmen's Club on Kadena. I was a bartender in a bar back there, and one of my fellow workers was a paralegal. So I talked to her. Amy thought that was a very good idea. So I actually cross-trained and became a paralegal. And in 1998, we PCS'd from Kadena to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, which was my first duty station as a paralegal. So most of my career, like I said, first 8.5 years was a weapons maintainer, but the rest of the time, or most of the rest of the time, was as a paralegal. I did some stints outside the paralegal career field just because I needed a break, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But paralegal career field. And in '98, went to Offutt. This is the difference between a weapons maintenance deployment and a paralegal deployment. So my weapons maintenance deployment was in the middle of the Saudi Arabian desert. And then in 2000, I had the opportunity, my law office superintendent at the time came to me and said, "Hey, we have an opportunity for you to excel." And I was a young staff sergeant at the time. I'm like, "Oh,
careful.
Here we go.
That's a trap. That's a trap right there.
Such a trap."
Yeah.
Anytime you hear opportunity to excel from a senior master sergeant and you're a lowly E5 staff sergeant, you're like, where am I going?
No.
And she says, yeah, we have this place that you can go. It's called the Balkans Combined Air Operations Center. And they work out of Vicenza, Italy. And I'm like, that's a deployment? She's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, let me go home and talk to Amy about it and see if she's okay with me deploying to Vicenza, Italy for 4 months. And so I came home and I explained to Amy, hey, I got this opportunity to excel. And
it's always an opportunity to excel.
She knows you're lying too. She just absolutely, she's in the Air Force. She's like, oh, an opportunity to Vicenza, Italy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Tough. I said, well,
smart, man. I didn't volunteer for this. They just put it in for that. They want me to go. This was not my idea. Like, how do you explain that?
For it? It just showed up on my doorstep.
I was the only staff in the room. I had to say yes, babe.
Right. I told her I didn't say yes yet. I wanted to come home and talk to you about it. She says, well, it's okay. I'll say yes on one condition, that at the end of your deployment, I can come over and we can, travel Italy and spend some time over there together. I said, I'm sure we can make that happen. So I was lucky enough to deploy the Balkans Combined Air Operations Center in Vicenza, Italy, in 2000. And Amy came over at the end and we toured, the European theater for about 3 or 4 weeks. It was a good little post-deployment getaway, and it made up for the time that I spent in the desert with her opposite tents. So come on.
That threshold rule was really getting you, and I'm sure you didn't do any shamming sort of like E4 stuff too. I would never allege that sort of thing. Lyle, can I? Absolutely not. I adhere to General Order Number 1 and the threshold rule every single time. For everybody out there that doesn't know what the threshold rule was, when you're deployed, they have this rule. It's called the threshold rule. Oh man. I almost got us canceled. All right. So males are not allowed to cross you are not allowed to cross the threshold of a domicile of someone of the opposite sex. We're in the Air Force. So a lot of times you have your own room. Sometimes you're sleeping in a tent with a bunch of people, but a lot of times you have your own room, and the opposite sex is not supposed to be able to cross the threshold of your room. That's why it's called the threshold rule. One more alibi, Lyle. Did I mispronounce your name? Is it Rosin?
It is Rosin. Nope, you're fine.
It's okay. No, it's very on brand for the internet.
Probably hit that up first thing out of the gate.
Hey, you let me call you the wrong name and everything. Like, listen, I get enough heat as it is for being an idiot. I don't need your help, Lyle. Like,
everybody says Rosin or Rosin, and it's
Rosin, yeah.
Some bag that you see,
sure.
in major leagues. So
all right, well, I'm an idiot,
and I just roll with it. My wife, on the other hand, she heard it. She'd have been on it. She'd be like, no,
I wish she was.
Rosin.
Yeah, I wish she would have berated me as opposed to nameless people on the internet. But hey, here we are. So Lyle Rosin, I apologize.
Quite all right. Apology accepted.
That is a weird rule, though, isn't it? The threshold rule. Like, I mean, I get it; it has a place, sure. But
you mean expecting people to be in high stress environments for 6 months at a time, telling them they have to behave like a warrior monk and deprive them of the basic creature comforts? In this case, the married comfort of somebody that he was legally married to. Yeah.
Here's the thing: I'm pretty sure, and I don't quote me on the number, but I think there were 6 couples between the 67 Fighter Squadron and the maintenance team that went over with the fighter squadron that were married. 6 couples. So we lobbied really hard and said, hey, just give us a married tent. Just send, it's a 12-person tent. Just put all of us married couples in tent. We'll be fine. And they were like, nope, can't do it.
Pretty sure that's in some movies or some videos on the websites too.
We were dumb E4s. We thought, hey, that's a great idea.
No, it is not.
Why not?
No, you know what? I've evolved on this. The threshold rule is great. You should maintain it, and you should never do the married tent. That is not a thing.
I thought that was a great idea, and a lot of the other E4s that I was with thought that was a great idea.
I bet they did.
I bet they did.
Got shot down. So that was like right after. So Khobar Towers happened, and that's how we ended up in Al Kharj, Saudi Arabia. And in these 12-person tents because Khobar Towers occurred and they wanted a safer place, so they put us out in this middle of this freaking desert. And so we erected the tents. We had I'm talking to guys, and I got to put this in perspective. I'm talking to guys who had it way far worse than I did, but we had the dirt floor tents. When we first got there was 18 guys to a 12-man tent. And it was not pleasant. We did, over the 4 months there, put wood floors down. So that was, a big advancement, especially during the winter months when it was raining and freaking sloppy out. But it was a neat experience. So that's enough on my maintenance deployment versus my paralegal deployment. You all see the difference, feel my pain. But I survived, and then again went back in 2001. I had PCS down to Maxwell Air Force Base, and was a paralegal instructor for 3 years. It was a controlled tour. The only way I would go to Montgomery, Alabama, is like if I want to go to Montgomery, Alabama, I'm going to go on a controlled tour. I know I'm going to only do 3 years, and we'll be moving out. But I only did 3 years as a paralegal before I became an instructor, which was kind of eye-opening and quite challenging as we as new paralegals were coming into the career field, and as their instructor, you had to kind of impart on them all of your wisdom, and I had all of 3 years of it. But at Offutt, I had some interesting cases. Enough exposure to the military justice system, claims back then when we were filing claims against movers that would break our stuff when we would PCS and things of that nature. So I did 3 years as an instructor. Then I moved out to Travis, was the NCIC of military justice out there. As soon as I put on Master Sergeant, I was like, all right, I want to be a first sergeant. So I jumped ship at that time after being the NCIC of military justice for a couple of years at Travis, and talked to my command chief and said, all right, I just got picked up for Master Sergeant. I want to be a first sergeant. And he sent me, and my career field let me go to do that on the condition that it was going to be one tour, only 3 years, and they would want me back. And I said, okay. So at the 3-year mark of my first sergeantdom, I asked for another 3 years, and they said, nope, come back to the career field. Because I really
almost made it.
Isn't it the same thing?
Almost got out.
Military justice and being a first sergeant, don't you deal with the exact same stuff?
It's different ends, Trent. One is on the fun end where you get to tell people they're idiots, and the other is on the other end where you tell them what they did was wrong.
You didn't really leave your career field. It's like you're just handing the stuff off to the people that you used to work with.
You're going to have to trust me. I'm pretty versed in the military justice system, so I know which ends is which. I know when you talk to the first sergeant, and I definitely know when you talk to legal. So
and they're different conversations. But you know, I was very good. You know, when I first cross-trained, one of the first things I had to realize was that the language that I used in the maintenance career field was not necessarily acceptable in the paralegal career field. And, you know, my first supervisor at OVAT as a paralegal was like, "Wow, you can't say that." I'm like, "What do you mean I can't say that?" It's, you know, it is what it is. And I would just go off on people. And they're like, "You're not in maintenance anymore. You have to build full sentences. You have to explain yourself. You can't use any profanities." And I'm like,
"What?
I don't know how long I'm going to last here." So when I got to be a first sergeant,
right back at it, baby.
Can you do us a favor though, Lyle? Like, explain what a shirt is, or first sergeant or a shirt, because we actually haven't had any on yet.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow. Oh, we haven't had any.
We haven't had any shirts on yet.
I got a couple shirts there. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the first sergeant career field back in the early thousands was a controlled tour. You know, there were some old hats in there. First sergeants really are the right hand person to the commander. The commander is obviously the overall guy or gal in charge of the unit. But the first sergeant is really the liaison between the enlisted corps and the command element of a unit. So for my time as a first sergeant, I was blessed, and I stayed out at Travis, and I was a first sergeant for 2 different flying squadrons. The C-17 at that time was just coming to Travis Air Force Base, and they needed a first sergeant as they were welcoming in the enlisted and the officer air crew to that aircraft and getting in aircraft. Usually, you know, every 3 months we would get a new aircraft, new crew, and we were building up the 21st Airlift Squadron at that time at Travis. So there was a threshold. I think, if I remember right, you had to have 75 enlisted people in a unit in order to warrant a first sergeant. And the first sergeant was responsible for the care and feeding of those enlisted members. Anything that went wrong, anything that went right, you had to recognize the right people, you had to discipline the right people, you had to hold people accountable. And honestly, in a flying unit, or in both flying units, it was a little bit of a challenge because you had a neat dynamic between the officer and the enlisted corps. For C-17s, you have a loadmaster who's the enlisted guy or gal, and you have the pilots who are officers. But when they, are downrange, or when they're flying their missions, they're staying at the same hotel, they're getting the same crew rest, they're, doing all of that stuff together. They're, working really hard, and they're partying harder sometimes, and they're all together, and the officer enlisted relationships, as you all know, there's a limit, and sometimes those lines were crossed. So a lot of times it was the commander coming to me asking, what should we do with this young officer, whether it be lieutenant or captain. Usually by the time you make major or lieutenant colonel, you figured it out. But a lot of our pilots were young lieutenants, young captains. And they were, of the same age frame as our loadmasters. So they were all doing the same stuff. But, they have a different set of standards, if you will, in the officer world. So I did that for the 21st Airlift Squadron. Once they stood up, I moved over to the 22nd Airlift Squadron, which was the C5 unit. C5s are obviously a bigger aircraft, and they have more enlisted individuals on that aircraft. So not only do you have a loadmaster, but you have flight engineers as well. So you've got 2 enlisted positions on that aircraft, a lot larger squadron. Same dynamic between officers and enlisted. But though, that was my time in those two flying units. I did deploy as a first sergeant as well. Probably the most challenging deployment I had.
I was going to say nightmare scenario. Like I'll tell you what, there are very few jobs that could bring me like back into the Air Force, and deployed as a first sergeant is the bottom of the barrel. Like that one, you don't even start with that one, because that is a nightmare built on top of a worst case scenario. Like worst.
Wait till I tell you who I was the first sergeant for. In 2008, there was this place called Camp Bucca, Iraq. Camp Bucca, Iraq was the largest internment facility of Iraqi detainees at that time.
I flew in and out of Bucca, I don't know how many times, because when you took people off target, where'd you have to take them?
Yep.
Bucca.
Yeah. So it was a very well lit place. You could see it, from miles away, because there was 10 or 12,000 Iraqi detainees there at any given time. And so the unit that I deployed with, I met up with them in where did we went into Washington State? What base? McCord. So we went out to McCord, and then Fort Lewis is out there. So Fort Lewis, we did our training. I had about just short of 200 security forces, Air Force folks, that I trained about a month with over the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday in 2008. For those 200, I went with the command element. So we had the commander, I had the chief, the superintendent, and then I had, obviously myself as a first sergeant. So the command element was swapping out at that time. So we took 192 guys, and we folded them into a unit that was already at Camp Bucca that would continually rotate security forces members in. That unit had 626 security forces members assigned to it.
Jeez.
And I was their first sergeant.
Oh.
I'll just let that digest for a
minute. Yeah, and that's crazy, because you talked about, some things that you dealt with when it came to air crew, enlisted versus officers, and how there's different standards and all that kind of stuff. But for a shirt, and I do want to get to some place of why we call you guys shirts and first sergeant and stuff like that. So that'll be a follow on. But if we're dumbing it down, I mean, a shirt or a first sergeant is called if anybody gets in trouble. So you're oftentimes the one going to getting somebody out of jail. If there's unprofessional relationships, you're involved in that, whether it's officer or enlisted. I mean, when we have officers that have issues or something's going on, like, they come to you. It's not always bad either. I mean, at least law wise or disciplinary wise. Like, sometimes it's, hey, I'm not getting my housing allowance. Shirt, can you help out? Because you guys are so connected on base or you guys are shirts. I don't know. I don't want to assume that you still want to identify as a shirt, but
people.
Yeah, you people. But shirts are so connected on base, and they know everybody. I mean, they really are just networking and connectors, and they know all the ins and outs on base and off base.
That is a true statement, and it's we had a weekly first sergeant meeting, and that's where a lot of the business got done, is because if you hadn't been exposed to a certain incident, I guarantee you somebody on that first sergeant council had been. So you were never flying solo. You always had peers to bounce things off of, and honestly, I don't think I ever encountered anything that somebody else hadn't already. I was never, the first in, and like, dude, I don't know what to do with this.
Which is wild. It just reminds me of that James Franco meme. Like, you had to walk into that meeting the one time and be like, oh my goodness gracious. All right, listen, I got a problem. It involves a donkey, a case of beer, a bet, and an unwanted pregnancy. And some other shirt just looks over, is like, oh yeah, first time? First time first time you ever had? Oh yeah, no. That happens all the time out here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a wild thing that you guys find yourselves in. So, do you know the history or the reason why we call first sergeants shirts
Sure.
or first shirt?
So first sergeant shirt, it's kind of, one and the same. The first sergeant was back in the day was the individual that was, again, like I said at the very beginning, responsible for the care and feeding of the enlisted corps within their unit. So back in the day, well before my time, even imagine that, before 1989, it was one of those things where the individual that was in charge of the care and feeding was the individual that was issuing out the first shirt. The first shirt that was issued to an individual was given by the first sergeant. And that was my understanding of it. There could be, some folklore to that. It could not, maybe it's not true, but that was my understanding of why we got the name shirt. You guys think of anything else?
No, that's exactly right. So the guy that hands out the shirts, you always take one for yourself, right? That's why the supply guy's always hooked up, right?
Right.
But part of that lore is why you call him the first shirt, is because he has the first shirt that comes out as he's handing everything out. That's why first sergeants or shirts care about standards, customs, courtesy. It's why you always connect. Like a first sergeant's going to walk up to you and be like, "Hey, bud, your uniform's out of like. Look at that hair. Look at those sunglasses. Take that stuff off." That's what the first sergeant, like he's the commander's sergeant, the first sergeant, and he always has the nicest clothes on because he gets the first shirt out of the box. But you nailed it. I'm glad we didn't put you on the spot. I love that piece of military history. That's why you call him a shirt.
I'm glad I had the right answer.
I'm glad both of you guys do, because I'm sitting here going like, dude, I have no idea. I don't know why. I just know that I've been dressed down by shirts.
Yeah.
I've been dressed down in front of an entire room, and then then another shirt came and apologized for that shirt because the way he dressed me down.
Believe it or not, I've spent a lot of time in shirts offices, so I've had time to read walls and stuff, So there's some plaques.
Yeah, you have.
So there's plenty of time for me to be like, oh, wow, that's an interesting fact about shirts I didn't know. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me get back to
Could you start changing your decor in here? Because, man, I'm in here a lot.
Old. Listen, buddy, I don't know how you work it.
Looking at the same stuff over
Right.
and
God,
over.
man, change it up.
Maybe
This office.
Visit so often.
Hey. Oh, I don't want to take personal accountability for my actions. I just want to complain about the guy's office. Let's take it easy, Lyle.
That's right. So my exposure to being a first sergeant for 626 security forces defenders was eye-opening, to say the least. Luckily for me, my chief, we called him the Big Toe. Larry Similton was his name. A great chief. Really, really taught me. He was a former first sergeant, had, obviously made it to the rank of chief master sergeant, was the squadron chief over there. And I learned a great deal from him. Before I left, I yelled at so many enlisted aircrew.
Good.
I lost count. But when I was deployed, I started on that path because I had a lot of security forces guys that I needed to get, squared away. But Larry Similton, Chief Similton, was one of those guys who, he would come to my office and he said, "Hey, sure, let's go for a walk." And I'm like, "Okay, let's go." So we'd go for a walk. And we'd walk 20, 30 minutes. And he would do most of the talking and I would be listening. And it would usually be after I had an encounter with an enlisted individual who needed some correction. And I did correct them in my own special way. And so the chief we'd go on these 20, 30 minutes walks. I'd get back to my office. I'd sit down at my desk. I'd sit there and I'd be like, I'm pretty sure I just got my ass chewed for 20 minutes, but the guy never raised his voice, never swore. He was the king of verbal judo. I mean, the guy was, it was something to behold. It was just like, wow, I just got my butt chewed for 20 minutes on something that I probably shouldn't have done. And I want to be more like him. I want to have that ability to have a conversation with an individual and let it set in 20, 30 minutes down the road after I've had the conversation, because it made a huge impact. And so Big Toe was one of those guys that really shaped my world as a first sergeant. Again, it was on my third year as a first sergeant that I deployed with him. So when I came back to the 22nd Airlift Squadron, I had a couple of guys come in and say, dude, what happened to you on deployment? Because you're a different guy.
Bro, you okay?
There was a number of things that happened on that deployment that made me a different guy. Chief Larry Similton was one of them. But dealing with, incoming rocket attacks and things of that nature has a tendency to kind of refocus your energies as well. So, yeah, that was First Sergeant at Camp Bucca, Iraq. I'll tell you one story about being a first sergeant in a deployed environment and thinking that you know everything going in. So we go in. There's only one way into Camp Bucca, and it's on Blackhawks. So 9 or 10 of us are all crammed in a Blackhawk, and there's 190 of us going in. So the inmates know when there's new people on the ground. They see, they're not dumb. They see, Blackhawk after Blackhawk coming in with new people, and they know there's new blood, that's going to be running that insane asylum. So you go through the briefings, the in-doc briefings. You hear what you shouldn't do at Camp Bucca, Iraq, yada yada yada. I'm not really paying attention because, I'm more worried about taking care of my folks, and I think I know everything. So a couple of weeks into it, I go to the shower tent. It's about 10 o'clock at night because, that's about the time I'm done with my day. And I'm like, you know what? I need to go get a shower and go to bed for a few hours. So I hit the shower tent at 10 o'clock at night, and I'm looking around. I'm like, wow, there's fucking nobody in this shower tent. I'm like, this is nice. It's normally packed. You're standing there, waiting for a shower to come open, and there's nobody there. And I'm like, this is great. I'm coming to take a shower every night at 10 o'clock. So I'm in there.
Oh, no.
So I'm in there. I'm showering like a madman, and
just all the hot water you want, soaked up, just two showers running just by yourself, just jamming, just vibing.
Like, this deployment is not going to be that bad. And then I hear this, and a couple of big thuds at the end of it, and I'm like, what the was that? And I had never been exposed to it before. So, and then the alarms went off. And again, in various forms of lather. And so I throw on my PT gear because the Air Force people on that post were allowed to wear their PT gear to and from the shower. So I throw my PT gear on with my sandals because we were also allowed to wear our shower shoes to and from the shower, where none of the other branches. So there were Navy and Army and Marine Corps guys there as well. None of the other branches could do that. The Air Force could because, we're special. So threw on my flip-flops and my PT gear and went and found a bunker to hide in while the attack was happening. And then from that time, the all clear, I went and, got my gear, my weapon, and then I needed to take accountability for the 626 dudes to make sure none of my guys got hit. So we had the recall. So I'm standing there and there's 3 guys. This is probably 45 minutes into the recall. There's 3 guys that aren't accounted for. And I'm like, it's bad. I just get the bad feeling. And then a couple minutes later, those 3 dudes come walking up, and they just have this, they're flushed. They just have this look about them that I've never seen on anyone before. And they were at the chow hall, which was right next to where the two rounds hit a housing unit. And they were the first responders to that housing unit. And so they saw the carnage that those rockets, incurred, and they were in a bad spot. And it was like, that was my first exposure to combat of any way, shape, or form, and it was, trying to take care of these 3 young guys, E4s, that had just, pulled people out of a housing unit. Some lived, some did not, and just trying to take care of them with, the mental health providers, the chaplain, all of those things that are put in place and just make sure that they're okay. So needless to say, what I had missed during my in-doc was that the rocket attacks normally occur between the hours of 8 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's why the shower tents weren't there. The last time I ever wear my shower shoes to the freaking tent, I always laced up my sneakers because if I got to go, I want to be able to run and not in my flip-flops.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my one story from Camp Bucca, Iraq. It was an interesting time, but again, I had a great chief who really ran the unit. The commander, I wasn't impressed. The chief wasn't impressed. It was really the chief who ran the unit.
As it should be. Good. The chief establishes the culture, and the commander worries about AFDD doctrine .1, whatever it is that he's supposed to do.
And that it's funny you should mention that, Aaron. That's exactly where his head was, and it was like, okay, we know how this is going to work. So it was good to have that chief in place, and we had the right chief at the right time, because that could have gone bad in a hurry had the big toe not been there.
Was the big toe bald? I just need to know.
The big toe is 100%. Bald.
Knew it. Yes.
Bald. And the dude used to run his PT with his gas mask on.
Oh, hard as woodpecker lips. This guy's not playing around.
He was no joke. He would be out there running laps with his gas mask on, and he was no joke. He was the real deal. But he had an eye injury, so when we went to training and we all got pepper sprayed, the most pain I've ever been in my life. But when we all got pepper sprayed, he claimed that his eye injury precluded him from getting pepper sprayed. He did have a crazy eye, because one of them never looked at him. So it was legit. But he was there to help me through that pain. So I would not have been the first sergeant returning to a flying squadron that I was. I would probably never have been a senior or a chief had it not been for Big Toe Larry Similton. So shout out to him. Great guy.
Well, I'm assuming there's a different way you have to handle things, right? Like, you're in charge of these people, and first sergeants, they kind of get to know everybody. But when you have 626 people that are constantly changing out, like, you have to change the way that you manage the welfare of all these people, right? And I imagine now that you're one of the higher ups at POVAT, it's like a lot of those lessons still translate, right? When you can't get to know everybody personally, but like getting those best practices and having the people that you can go to help you out. I'm assuming like that made a huge difference in the way that you communicate to larger groups of people and how you change the culture, you and the chief, because you can't individually look out for every single one of those security forces. Is that right?
Correct. And you really have to rely on the hard chargers that are, the squad leads, and pick out those few people that you kind of walk in the same path as the Chief Similtons and are going in that direction, and really rely on them to be the ones that bring up, the things that need to be handled at our command level, and the things that don't need to be handled at our command level, they will take care of it, and they consistently do. So trust in the people that are leading, the day-to-day ops is extremely important, and it is extremely important in POVAT as well. The day-to-day ops, I'm blessed with having a great team here to help me through that. So let's transition into POVAT here real quick, if you don't mind.
No, please.
Because that's a great lead into how did I become involved, and how did this all happen? So from Travis, I went to Scott, from Travis, where did I go? I have to remember. I went to Scott Air Force Base at headquarters AMC, where I met an individual. Her name was Linda Fraker. She is now the POVAT case manager, because of the relationship that we built back in the day when I was stationed at Scott as the law office superintendent for the Air Mobility Command. And she was one of the folks that helped me out when we went out on IG inspections and things of that nature. Very, very bright lady, way more educated than I was. I was a senior master sergeant. She was a tech sergeant, but she had already had, umpteen degrees and was a very, very smart person. And so that's where I initially met Linda. I'll talk about her a little bit later. I moved on from Scott and went down to Eglin, was the law office superintendent there as a senior master sergeant. And I did about 2 years there, and then the Air Force Special Operations Command paralegal manager job came open. It was the only command paralegal manager job that was a senior master sergeant billet. All the rest of the commands warranted a chief. So I was one and the only senior master sergeant command paralegal manager. And so I went to AFSOC in 2013, I think. And as a senior master sergeant, and I was there for about a year. My command chief at the time was Command Chief Bill Turner. That name probably rings a bell. He was one of the Bill's got an interesting story with POVAT as well that I'll share a little bit too. So it's kind of neat how everything kind of comes full circle and you end up where you're supposed to end up, and you meet the right people along the way. Just as I'm sure, you guys can attest, there's a reason the three of you are sitting, in the same room, the same team room. It's because, you all have the same kind of likes and dislikes and you get along and you're in each other's lives for a reason. You get along to certain extents.
There you go. There you go.
You reach your limits at a certain point and everybody else in the room knows what that limit is. And you just walk away.
A menace in the group chat, Lyle. An absolute menace in the group chat.
Yep.
So in 2014, I had aspired to be a command chief at some point. I was getting a little long in the tooth, and I was a senior master sergeant still, within the paralegal career field. And I'm like, I do want to make chief. I do want to, lead on a bigger stage. And I had many conversations with Bill Turner, who was my command chief at the time. And one of the things that Bill told me was like, Lyle, you've got to, have you been to Afghanistan? And I said, no, I hadn't deployed since 2008 when I went to Iraq. I'd never been to Afghanistan for as long as we've been in Afghanistan. And he says, you need to go to Afghanistan, but you need to go outside the paralegal career field. You need to be in charge of more people. You need to be doing more things. So there was essentially a force support squadron superintendent gig at Bagram that he kind of said, I think you're the right fit for it. If you can get released from your career field, I'd like to send you. And so again, I went back to my career field manager, pleaded that I wanted to go on a deployment as senior master sergeant out of AFSOC, and they reluctantly said yes. So I deployed to Bagram, Afghanistan. My command team, when I got on the ground, was Colonel Christopher Ireland and Chief Master Sergeant William Markham. Didn't know either one of those guys from, Tom and Tim down the road. Got to know them over my time there. They were there for a 1 year stint because they were the command team. And I was just coming in as their force support squadron. But at that time, we were moving from the little bee huts there into multi-million-dollar dormitories, hardened dormitories, hardened facilities. We moved from the jock that was in a bee hut to a multi-million command, building. And so I helped make that move. And then, a couple of things happened on that deployment. Obviously it's Bagram. It's kind of, I get to see what Colonel Ireland does as a leader. I get to see what Charlie Mike does as a leader for that unit. And one thing struck me kind of odd. when we would get new operators in, whether they were gunship guys, TACPs, CCTs, PJs, whoever they were, special operators, when we would get those guys in, the command element would always give the brief. Colonel Ireland would, say stuff. Will Markham would get up and say stuff. And everybody know him as Charlie Mike, his call sign. And so it struck me as odd that all of these hard charging special operators that came into theater, once the briefings were done, would all go up to Will and give him a big, giant bear hug and, shoot the shit with him. And, I'm like, who is this fucking guy? I mean, why does everybody, he's the command chief. I've never seen anybody hug a command chief, but everybody's hugging this guy and I have no idea who he is. And honestly, I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what he had done in 2001. I knew none of that. And it wasn't until towards the end of my deployment where, Will kind of said, so just so you know, and we went up on the roof of the command building, and he pointed to the mountaintops and the plateaus leading into Bagram, and the safe houses on the other side of the wall. And he's like, in 2001, I was the guy with ODA 555 triple nickel coming down into Bagram. And I'm like,
he's like, hey, in 2001, I made every one of these hills about 10 meters shorter by the work that I did over the course of 15 days. See that hill over there? That hill used to be a mountain, and now it's just a nice, easy defilade into camp.
Right. And so I'm like, I'd been there for 4 or 5 months, and he had never said anything to me about that. And I never thought to ask, because he was just that humble. He was the quiet professional. And that, one of the things that I took out of AFSOC, in my short 3 years there was that you all are quiet professionals, and you don't seek the limelight. You just go about doing what you're supposed to do, and it gets done, and it gets done very professionally. And nobody has to question your motives. You know what needs to get done, and it consistently gets done at a high level. So, now it kind of made sense to me why everybody wanted to hug this freaking command chief. I'm like, okay, I get it. And if you've ever got a hug from Will Markham, it's a pretty good hug.
Well, he's a big dude too. Like
he is.
He's a
it makes you feel so safe,
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, like I would love to see an actual real picture of Will Markham just hugging the shit out of Peaches. Like that would it would make me so happy. Just
like picking me up, having me on his hip kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Come on. We're going this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But not everybody that did something in the war gets that same reception. Like that's a huge, you can see who he is by the way that everybody treats him. A bunch of these folks are probably like staff sergeants, senior airmen.
Yep.
But just the way that he treats everybody is the exact same. If you do your job, if you're good at your job, like I'm going to take care of you. Everybody felt like they had top cover. So like those are the kinds of things that really in that community is going to get you all the love that you could ever want. And people might see that from the outside and be like, that seems a little unprofessional. But like I've said it before, there ain't a single person that wouldn't follow that dude off of a cliff if you asked them to.
Yeah.
So
that is so true. And he had a way of getting his, again, he was one of those, again, quiet talkers, just like the big toe. I saw him, lean over to talk to a couple of people. Again, never raised his voice. They didn't get up from the chair that they were seated in, but I knew what he was saying to them. And you could see, all the blood rush from the guy's face. And I'm like, oh boy, but I hate to be on the other end of that conversation. Because a chief is getting his point across in some way, shape, or form. And it's usually just by saying a couple of words and getting the person to understand, where the chief's coming from. So again, having only been in AFSOC a couple of years and then having that deployment based on, Bill Turner's advice, this is where you need to be. My eyes opened up tremendously on the capability of not just, the Air Force special operators, but there was 160th SOAR guys there. You know, our deputy commander was a colonel, full bird colonel from 160th SOAR, and it was just an interesting environment, and to be able to be in the JOC and see the missions go out, and you know, the infills and the exfills, and you know how all of that happened. I would never have been exposed to that as a paralegal in my wildest dreams, but to be able to see that and understand it to a level was extremely important at that time in my career. And you know, before I had left, General File showed up in my office before I had left Hurlburt at AFSOC. I was sitting in my office one day, and General File came in and presented me with his coin and my chief stripes, because I had been selected for chief. So when I was over in Bagram, Colonel Ireland did my promotion ceremony. Chief Markham was the one that pinned the chief stripes on my chest. I'm pretty sure my sternum's still bruised from his big meat left hand, you know, hitting me right about there where my chief stripes were. But it was a neat environment to be in. And again, you know, I got introduced to Will Markham at that point in time in my life. One of the things that, you know, kind of bonded us together, my wife, again, she was still back at Eglin. She was the career assistance advisor, advising, you know, more people to cross-train into career fields that they shouldn't have been in the first place. But she was actually officially doing this. She was a senior master sergeant at the time. When I promoted, Bill Turner had moved on to U.S. Transcom, and Matt Caruso had come in as the command chief for AFSOC. And so when I had my promotion ceremony at Bagram, they video teleconferenced my wife Amy in with Matt Caruso, and a couple of people from my office got to see it as well. So again, it was a neat experience to have. And so, you know, I promoted over there. I met Will. Will had a way of getting people into his office by his wife, Charity, lovely wife, Charity, would send him bread recipes, you know, in a pouch, and he had a bread maker in his office. And so if he wanted to draw people to his office, he'd make a loaf of bread, and that would go through the entire command element and be like, okay, I got to get a piece of bread.
Well, yeah, because they thought it was a chemical attack. Isn't that one of the, like, it's like smells like fresh cut hay or baking bread? Like, after they got their gas mask off and figured out it was just CM cooking up a loaf of sourdough, everybody was cool.
That's right. But it was neat to be able to, you know, again, see, you know, who would show up to get the slice of bread, who was brave enough to walk into the office and say, hey, that smells pretty good. Can I get a slice of that? You know, that he had an interesting and very effective way to lead. And, you know, people loved him, still love him. And the reason, you know, why when POVAT stood up and he needed some help, he asked Amy and I to step up, and we did not hesitate. Like you said, you'd follow him off a cliff. So when he needs help with a nonprofit that he's starting up, by all means, you know, we're going to do that. One of the things that happened when we were deployed at Bagram was Charity was moving, I think, from Tampa up into the Panhandle because they had just got a house in Niceville, and that's where Amy and I were living. So Will came to me one day and said, hey, you know, can you send Amy over to help Charity move into the house, because she knows nobody up there in the Panhandle in Niceville. And so I'm like, sure. So I called Amy and I said, hey, you don't know her, but this is the command chief's wife. She's moving into this place. Can you go over and help her move in? And so Amy showed up when the moving trucks moved in, and Charity was like, wow, you know, that was nice. And Charity and Amy have been, you know, friends ever since that day. And it's just, again, you know, helping out, you know, your fellow comrade, you know, the person who is doing everything for you. And you know, that was a unique way for Amy to meet Charity, and that relationship to, you know, fruition into what it is today. So pretty cool. roundabout way of getting to the fact that when Will asked for help in 2020 on this thing called Project One Vet at a Time, Amy and I said, sure, we'll come help.
And I can see the breadcrumbs as we're talking through this entire thing, right? From your experiences of, experiencing those rocket attacks. I've also shared some time, like maybe with my, not in the best form of dress, in a porta potty, catching incoming and just being like, well, I guess this is it. I guess this is how we go. But these funny stories and these experiences led you to becoming, a chief master sergeant and doing all this other stuff, and then making this connection with Will. But throughout this entire thing, there's this thread of, I wanted to help. I wanted to be a first sergeant. I wanted to take care of the enlisted guys. So of course, in 2020, when Project One Vet at a Time popped up, and you had this great relationship with a great guy, CM, who we've had on the podcast and talked to a bunch of times outside of it. When it came time for you to be of service going in, of course, that's why you said yes. It was the right people. It's the right mission. And that's what Project One Vet at a Time is. Can you lay out exactly what Project One Vet at a Time's mission is and what you guys have been doing, from 2020 on, and what's the goal?
So what, obviously the goal is to help as many veterans and active duty folks as we can as they transition into the civilian sector with their Department of Veterans Affairs. We don't like to say disability because I don't feel like I'm disabled. Aaron, probably don't, there's some disability there. We can tell just by looking at you, buddy. But
yes,
there's some
that's
level
not service. That's not service connected. First of all, that's mean. All right. I've always been this way.
It's Ohio connected.
It's Ohio connected. First of all, and second of all, I didn't claim it, smarty pants, and you know that. So yeah. I kept the previous problems off the sheet to stay clean.
That's good. That's good. It's nice to be able to separate your going in issues with your service connected issues. But we're one of those agencies that wants to help out people with their VA compensation and pension. So Scott Zastro, who's another guy, again, didn't know who this guy was either until I got involved with Project One Vet at a Time, and he's our medical consultant. But Scott Zastro, gives the analogy of the branch of service that you were attached to rented you for a certain period of time. Either it was 4 years, 6 years, in my case, 30 years, what have you. And during that time, you suffered some dings and dents along the way. You were a rental vehicle. You did the walk around in 1989. You did the walk around when I was 19 years old, and there was nothing wrong with me, I thought. But after 30 years, and the 30 years of the Air Force making me run when I'm not a runner, save a few of those years where we were just on the bike, which I was happy with. It takes its toll. And so what we try to do at POVAT is help our referred veterans get the VA compensation and pension that they've earned and deserve. And it should be at no cost to them. They should not have to go hire an attorney to get what they've earned and deserve. They should not have to, fight with the VA because they don't understand the process to get what they've earned and deserve. Again, a lot of our time in the military is spent following guidelines, following instructions, following, guidance from, the command element. But when you transition out, it's not there. You don't know what to do, where to go. Well, luckily for me, when I transitioned, when I retired in 2019, my wife Amy had retired in 2017. So she did 26 years, retired as a senior master sergeant. And she was very lucky in that she got in touch with a VFW rep who helped her file her claim, and he did a very good job. So good that when I retired in 2019, I went back to that guy, and I was like, Amy, is happy with her service connection, rated disabilities, and I would like you to do the same thing for me. Take a look at my stuff and tell me what I need to do to get this right the first time. So he was in the Joint Base Andrews Air Force Base, area at the time. By 2019, he had moved up to VFW headquarters in DC somewhere. So I literally had to track the dude down at VFW headquarters in DC and be like, no, I'll come up there and I'll sit with you. I know it's not in your wheelhouse right now, but I know you're good at this and I need some help. And he was extremely good at what he did. So he helped me out. Will went through a difficult assessment. The correct assessment occurred initially when he got out. And he was rated appropriately at 100% service connection, compensation and pension rating, because of what he'd gone through and what he'd suffered in his 30 plus years in the service, and that was a fair rating. And then he goes in to a reeval essentially, with a nurse practitioner that's probably in her mid 20s, and in 7 minutes she decides he's better,
and downgraded him. And he said that and downgraded his rating. Like, that was when he said that on the podcast. I didn't know that story. That was the first time that I'd ever heard that it was possible. I was not tracking the difference between permanent and total. And shout out to Scott Zastro. Scott Zastro taught me, led me, guided me, mentored me through this entire process. And if I didn't have him, I would be left in the lurch, quite literally. To hear that they downgraded Chief Markham, and that was one of the impetus of getting Project One Vet at a Time going, that was frustrating to the point of maddening. Like, I personally don't know the man, right? Like, I know the lore of the man and I've had some conversations with him, but I remember having a physical angry reaction when I heard that on the podcast. Like, right. I was upset by it.
So he goes from 100% down to 30%. And not only does he do that, but so there's now no VA care, medical care. And the VA says, oh, by the way, for that period of time, we overpaid you and we're going to recoup that money. And you know how the U.S. government recoups money, like that. So it put him in a really, really bad spot. But for the fact that he had some really, really good friends that were willing to help him fight, he would be hard pressed to be where he is today. We would be hard pressed to know, I think, Will Markham as we do today. But he had Jeff O'Hara, Dr. Mark McLaughlin, Ed Hockley. I'll throw that name out there just because some people may recognize that name from NFL football.
Like the NFL ref, yeah. The only reason people know Ed Hockley is because he got like 22-inch arms, and dude's just his son is an NFL referee now as well. Yeah,
yep, exactly. But he had those folks kind of in his corner. Ed and Jeff are both attorneys. Dr. Mark McLaughlin's a Princeton brain and spine guy, brilliant individual. But he had those folks that were in his corner to help him, argue his case. And it took him 2 years to get back to the rating that he was initially given. And this time it was a clear, unmistakable error is what they call it, Q, CUE. And they, reimbursed him the amount of money that they took from him, plus any of the back pay over that 2-year period, and put him back at 100% TNP. And Will's mindset is coming out of that hearing with the VA representatives and them admitting that it was a clear, unmistakable error. His mindset wasn't, to celebrate and go off and, have a couple of liters of Jameson. It was, he came out of there and talked to Jeff and Dr. Mark and said, I have you guys in my corner. I have all these friends that wrote me these letters, explaining what I did for the Air Force and for our country. But what about the guy that doesn't have that? What about the gal that, she's a freaking staff sergeant, got out at 8 years and she's not getting any compensation and pension, even though she went through some bull crap along the way. What about those folks? How are they getting help? Because I've got you guys, but I guarantee you, a lot of people don't have anybody.
Well, that was probably the problem. I'm sorry, with that physician's assistant or nurse or whatever. That was the problem. Is I don't think that they understand that most of these folks don't want to have to like beat you over the head with what they did, right? Like it's an uncomfortable thing to go into these offices and be like, I did this and like I should be compensated. Like it's way more comfortable to have someone else, doing that for you than
Right.
us going in there, because you don't want to aggrandize yourself. Like it's a weird thing to do. And so if you don't know, Chief Markham and everything he's done, he's probably downplaying a little bit, or in his mind explaining it exactly how it happened. And to this person, it sounds like, oh well, you're fine then. It's like, no, he's not going to complain, and he's not going to be like, I'm a war hero, like.
Right.
And so like that's why you need the other people to go to bat for you.
And that's consistently why we talk about having referred veterans. So this thing started with Will, and what he went through, but Will knew other people that were going through the same thing. So Will referred the first clients to what was then Project One Bed at a Time. That wasn't even a Project One Bed at a Time. He just knew that there was other folks that needed help, and so in 2019. He on a shoestring budget, referred 5 guys that were going through the same issue, and fought for them to get the compensation and pension rating that they earned and deserve. And that's what he did in 2019, and in 2020. Again, I had retired in 2019, and he was like, hey, I need some help with this thing because there's more people out there that we need to help. And I'm like, okay, so I moved. Amy and I are in Bradenton, Florida. Will's in Parrish. He's about 15 minutes down the road. So we used Will and Charity's real estate agent. We came down here. We looked around the neighborhood. We found this lovely house here in Bradenton, and we sat down in what is now our home office, and we started working with Will to get this thing off the ground in 2020. And quite frankly, it was a little out of some things that he was asking us to do were kind of out of our wheelhouse. I mean, there were things that needed to get done, that I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, buddy. I know you want me to be the accountant, and I'm really good at balancing my budget, but this budget that we're dealing with here at POVAT is growing, and it's growing quickly. And so Amy and I went to him, and he said, and we were honest with him, like, look, one of two things is going to happen. Either Amy and I are going to get divorced because we can't balance these books, and I want to choke her out, and she wants to punch me over the head, or you're going to find an accountant, because that's who you need. And so he found an accountant. And Matt Harris is the POVAT accountant who keeps the book straight. And Amy and I kept the boat afloat for about a year. But thank God Matt Harris came along, because there were some days where we were like, whew, I don't know if this is worth it.
Yeah,
but
I can imagine. So with that, and you got like we've we're going to continue to have a love affair with POVAT, but what is another way that folks on the outside can help with POVAT?
So, just kind of understanding what we're doing, and visiting our website and our Instagram and our Facebook page is, we're all on LinkedIn, and just understanding what we're doing. There's a plethora of veterans who need assistance. We don't want, and this was a discussion that we all had, Doc, Mark, myself, Mark, Jeff, and Will, along with the other board members. We don't have the capability to help everyone, but we can help out those. And you keep hearing me talk about referred veterans, but it costs money to get people through our project. We don't want the veteran to pay a dime. Literally, we do not want them to pay a dime. If they have to go to FedEx or Kinko's or wherever to make copies of their records because they've got, they were back pre-1989 and they had hard copy records. They didn't have this electronic thing that you all have nowadays. They have to go and make copies of that and put it in a PDF and buy the thumb drive and plug it in and upload those files to us. We will pay. We'll reimburse them for that. All they have to do is send us a receipt and we will reimburse them for that. Doctor's visits, co-pays, things of that nature to get their case where it needs to be so that it's properly substantiated. That all costs money. So, we're in the business of raising awareness and raising revenue. And in order to get more people through the project, we have to have the revenue. So fundraising is something that we do all year long. If you go to our website at projectovat.org, you'll see, there's a donate button there. We hold events. There's an event happening up in Wisconsin next weekend, actually. It's the Wisconsin POVAT Invitational, the second year that it's taken place. We hold it in Wisconsin for two very important reasons. Scott Zastro and Will Markham. They grew up in that area. It's a blue collar event that people come out to support their hometown heroes. And I know Scott and Will hate
I'm sure they do hate it.
They do.
They certainly do. And they don't look at themselves that way. But some folks, if I hadn't been deployed and been introduced to Will Markham, I probably would have never known who he was. I would not known that he was the first Air Force airman in Afghanistan after 9/11, a month after 9/11. But why wouldn't I have known that?
Because it wasn't in the movie. That's why you don't.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, because they made him an Army guy in the movie 12 Strong. And just so everybody's tracking, because we're kind of dancing around it, and I'm not that type of dude. Scott Zastro and Will Markham were one of the 12 horse soldiers. So Scott Zastro was an 18 Delta at the time, but he was the 18 Delta on the team that went into Afghanistan, the triple nickel, and literally decimated the Taliban. They thought it was going to take 6 months to a year, and these gentlemen did it in 15 days. Read Scott's book, the De Guayo. It's a fantastic oral history of the book or of the event, right? So it's a fictionalized account with different names, but it actually lays it out. But Will Markham and Scott Zastro were two of those people on horseback that were doing that in northern Afghanistan with the Northern Alliance, which is can't be overstated.
And there's some truth to that, but there's also some fallacy to that. So and I want to put the record straight. There were horse soldiers. There was an ODA that was bebopping around on horseback, and then there was the triple nickel. But they were doing similar things in different areas of Afghanistan. I'm intimately familiar with the triple nickel because that's where Will and Scott spent their time at. And now that Scott is a huge integral part of Project One Bed at a Time, I understand the story. I've also read the book, the De Guayo, and it is it's interesting to me because I know two of the guys in that book. And when you can put those two, those things together, it's a neat historical perspective that I think more people should have. But the reason we have that event, that fundraising event in Wisconsin, is because I think those people up there need to understand who they have in their midst, who they grew in the great state of Wisconsin to go do these things. Growing up and into my Air Force career, I spent a lot of time, reading and understanding about the greatest generation, the World War II generation, that a lot of us who, when we came in the 80s and 90s, wanted to be like. We wanted to be those folks when the nation called, we answered the call. And obviously, the folks on this screen, Will and Scott, in their own capacities, have all answered the call. So it's, again, referred veterans is one of those things that, who did Will know at the beginning? Who did he know needed help? He knew 5 guys. And those, we asked 2 things, and only 2 things from our veteran clients. And that's, 1, if you so desire, once the process is complete, once you've made it through the project, if you want to give us a testimonial about your experience, we would greatly appreciate it, because what that does for us is that gives us fodder to go at our donors and explain to them what difference this made in this individual's life. And the second thing And the most important thing that a veteran owes us is the name of the next guy. That's where the referral comes in. The referrals, it consistently grows. From 2019, 5 people, to last year, 2023, we had 65 people, to this year, we're shooting for 75. And I can tell you right now, we have 56 in the queue. So there's 56 folks in 2024 that we're already processing through the project. Again, that all costs money. And let me tell you that the money is well spent in donor dollars. And I'm going to put it into perspective for you, because I don't think, I know we couldn't have figured this out on our own, but there was a fundraiser that occurred where Will was asked the question, if I give you X amount of dollars, how many veterans can you help? And what is the return on that investment? And Will was like, the rest of us knuckle dragging folks were like, I hateable. We all did that. We all did this. We're like, I have no idea. We just help people. We get them what they've earned and deserved, and everybody moves on. But it was a great question, and we had a person in a position, Jeff O'Hara, again, one of the co-founders of Project One Bed at a Time, in his capacity as trial lawyer, knows some people, and the Center for Forensic Economic Studies stepped up and graciously covered the cost of a study for us. And initially, they took 10 people. I think I ended up giving them, let me look here real quick. I ended up giving them initial 10 and then the subsequent 20 about. So about 30 case studies. So we took, every one of these individuals has a life expectancy. As middle-aged white men, we have a certain amount of life we can expect to get out of this. If you're Latino, you get that. If you're, African-American, you get that, all of these things, but there's a life expectancy. So if you're expected to live until you're 80 or 77 or whatever it is, from the day that you get your VA compensation and pension money inbound to your account, depending on when you filed and when you're going to die, is how much money you're going to get. So I can tell you that the average cost to put someone through the project is around $10,000. We can get some folks through at 5,500. We can get some folks through at 10. Some folks we end up spending 30. It just depends on what the case is. But the average, based on the Center for Forensic Economic Studies and the 30 cases that we gave them, is around $10,500. On that $10,500, if you take the average increased lifetime financial benefit to that veteran over his or her lifetime is going to get between $460,000 to $500,000. So as you sit there, Aaron, and you project that you're going to live until you're 80, the amount of money that you're going to get, depending on, the life you live and the quality that you. But, based on that, it's fair to say, and quite frankly, because you were an active duty guy when we took you on, and so that's a whole different realm. And I'm going to throw another number at you. So let's take the active duty guy, because I gave them one active duty guy because I was interested in the difference, because everybody up to this point have been veterans. So they've been out for a while. They felt like they were, shorted on their compensation pension rating. They wanted us to reevaluate. We reevaluated. They went from 20 to 60. They went from 60 to 100. Whatever that delta was, is where that $465,000 increased lifetime rating, increased lifetime income comes from. But if you're active duty and we get you the benefits delivered on discharge, the BDD, which is something that should happen if the individual is willing to put in the work, that amount jumps exponentially to over $1 million. So if you don't think you need your benefits delivered on discharge, I'll tell you, if you don't think you can spend $1 million between now and the time you die, then don't do it. But otherwise, you need to freaking get it done.
Nah, I can't. Don't need it. Don't want it.
Dude, don't need a
Just keep
million.
it.
Don't
Just
need a
keep it.
million, dog. It's yeah.
Hey, Lyle, I've got to bounce because I've got a hard out.
Yep,
But
no
I
worries.
didn't want to leave without saying thank you for everything that you guys do, you and the team, and thanks for helping me and Trent and Aaron out. So
Absolutely. Again, it's been a pleasure to put a face with a name at this point. And I know where your case is, and I know that you're talking to Scott Zastro. You're in good hands, and
I know
again, he's all about the regs, and he knows them inside and out.
he does.
And the advice that he gives you on what you need to do, you need to take to heart. He's the real deal, and he's the reason that you all are going to get to where you need to be.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time, Lyle. I'll bounce. Enjoy the rest of the conversation.
All right. Thanks, Peaches.
See you, Peach.
That's a hometown hero, Scott Zastro.
Exactly. Hometown hero, Scott Zastro. He actually talked about his experiences for one of the first times. Like he and I talked about, this was just recently that he told that story. Lyle, I do want to address something because it was something that I struggled with, and Trent, between Trent, Peaches, and I, we are those guys, luckily enough that we're referred and went through the program while on active duty towards the end. I think I had the best rating that I could possibly get for my history. I think I had it before my actual retirement date. I think that, I like everything was good. I had my initial letter, then I retired and the system took care of itself. And as fast as possible, it was less than a month later, I had that rating.
And
there were,
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, were you the one that went through the Pueblo and had the medical?
It is. Yep.
Okay.
Because it was a little bit different because I was med boarding, right? Like I was already in the process of a med board, and my timeline was really, really short. It shortened up by a whole lot, suddenly. And that's when I, was referred to basically be like, hey, I thought I had, 18 months left on this contract. It turns out it's going to be, I don't know, more like 6, and I need to figure this out. Some of the stuff that we struggle with, though, and I kind of want to hear your thoughts on it, is there's this feeling among veterans, especially among the special operations community, that you compare yourself to somebody like Will Markham. You compare yourself to these giants that have gone before you. And the nagging voice in the back of your head goes, hold on. Yes, I'm injured. Yes, I deal with daily pain. Yes, I have these things that I think I should be compensated for, because really, if I wasn't in the Air Force, I wouldn't have TBIs, because I got TBIs from falling away from blasts and falling off of things and getting my bell rung and whatever, right? Like there is something that's in the back of my head and Trent's head and Peach's head, because we've talked about it, and I'm sure other vets, I won't speak for them, but you compare yourself to somebody and you say, well, that's what somebody that's really, this person that lost both of their legs, they're really disabled. I am not disabled. And you have this really hard time of getting there. And that was honestly one of the biggest things that Scott did for me, is he sat down and he's like, listen, idiot, I know you feel this way, but that's not valid. Like you are discounting yourself, and you are gatekeeping essentially this rating for what you earned for yourself. I have to imagine that other vets that come to POVAT feel that way. What would you say to those folks that are having those feelings to get them to engage and to get them to actually get compensated what they're worth?
So that's a great point, Aaron, and I hear it all the time. I can't tell you, again, since 2019 to present, there's 218 people within Project OVAT, and 200 of them are probably have the same mindset, because they've all been referred, and they're all, most of them are special operators, and again, it goes back to being the quiet professional. And you don't want to be the guy that identifies, hey, I need to go to the doc because my knee hurts. You don't want to be the guy that identifies that he's got some psychological stressors that he's dealing with, because he doesn't want to be off the teams. But you need to be considered for your VA compensation and pension rating on your own merits. And I cannot more plainly put it than my own experience. And I will tell you that for me, as I'll say a paralegal in an office job. Yes, I did time on the flight line. Yes, I did. So my hearing's not what it's supposed to be because of that. But most of my time was in an office as a paralegal, as a first sergeant, as a station chief of the Defense Careers Service. Those things caused my own psychological stressors. My psychological stressors are mine. I'm not going to compare them to yours. I'm not going to compare them to Will's. I'm not going to compare them to anybody else's because I know what they are. And again, if it had not been, so here's the thing about us folks that get a little long in the tooth in the military branches, and we see the amputee that clearly has a disability that we're like, dude, that dude needs the money more than I do. It's not about he needs the money more than you do. It's about you're entitled to your own amount. And what is that amount? We don't promise you that we're going to get you to a certain percentage. We promise you that we're going to give you an honest look. And Scott has a number of cases where he's come back to me and said, Lyle, he's rated where he's supposed to be. And I'm like, okay. And that gives that veteran closure on something that he, for whatever reason, needs to address. Maybe he thinks he's entitled to more, but when we give him the honest and candid feedback that we do and say, you're rated appropriately, you're good to go. If things get worse and you think you warrant an increase further on down the road, you're always a member of the POVAT family. You could always call us back up and say, hey, you know what? That hip thing that I had that I didn't think was going to turn into anything, now I got to get a hip replacement. Is that gonna up my rating? Well, more than likely it is. So let's take a look at that now. So once you're a member of POVAT, you're always a member of POVAT. You can always come back. I'll tell you that it took me 28 years to figure out that I had some significant psychological stressors that occurred within my career. And it took my wife one morning walking out to the car as I was getting ready to leave to go to work. And I was sitting in my car in the garage getting ready to go, and I just couldn't go. I'm like, this is 28 years of my life that I've given to this country. And I've got some things that I need to get off my chest. And she tapped on the window. She like rolled it down. She's like, and I was not in a good headspace. She was like, wow, I don't know what's going on with you, but if you're not going to talk to me, you have got to talk to somebody. And I'm like, oh God, that just, bless her heart. We've been married for 28 years in June of this year. And, she's the one who can say those kinds of things to me and know what she's talking about. So I did what every airman, soldier, Marine should do, is go seek help. So I did. I was a 28-year Chief Master Sergeant. I went into the mental health, and I walked up to the counter and said, I need to talk to somebody. And she's like, okay. So he sent me to behavioral health. Okay. This is where the fun starts. So they sent me to behavioral health, and I went to behavioral health, and the young physician's assistant or whoever she was, explained to me that yes, clearly I had some things that I need to work through. And she gave me an app on my phone and said, here are some breathing exercises that I would like you to do. And I was like, whew, my head just came off my shoulders. I was like, okay, again, I was a chief in the Air Force. I'm like, okay, I'll play this silly game. Again, having been a first sergeant, now I'm a chief, and now you're telling me to go do these breathing exercises on this freaking app that you're giving me. I got it. So I did it for a week. And then I picked up the phone and I called the mental health folks again. And luckily for me, another staff sergeant picked up the phone, and she was like, how can I help you? I'm like, I think you can help me, but I was in there last week, and I was given some breathing exercises by your behavioral health person, and they ain't working. I didn't think they would work, but I figured I'd give them a shot. And so what I need from you, Staff Sergeant so-and-so, is for you to refer me to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I don't care who, but I need that person to be versed in senior level leader problems. I don't need some young captain psych guy or gal who's never been exposed to anything in their career. I need someone who's used to dealing with some shit. And she's like, I got the right person. So she referred me to a psychologist that I spent the better part of a year with, unboxing everything that I had compartmentalized over my 28-year career. And things were happening towards the end of my career that were significant, life-changing events. We all have them. The significant life-changing events that were occurring to me was I was losing the stability of the United States Air Force and what it had brought me for 28 years. I knew I was having to retire in 2 more years. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how that was going to look. And it frightened me. And the second pillar that unfortunately happened was my father passed away. But it's all happening at the same time. And I'm like, I'm having to deal with all this stuff. And I needed somebody to talk to. And she was very good. The psychologist was very good at talking to me and through me. And my boss, who was back at U.S. Transcom, Colonel Buente, Robert Buente, was very understanding in my weekly appointments. Sometimes, well, it was every other week I would go talk to her. He was very understanding, and that's what I needed to do. And then, towards the end of it, she was like, have you ever thought about, taking medication for it? I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, our stories are remarkably the same. I'm hearing some of the words that you're saying, and I'm like, the first time that I went in and somebody looked at me and was just like, oh yeah, cool. No, I think you're having these problems. It's really going to have to, you're really going to have to do some work. But in the meantime, how about I give you these SSRIs? In the meantime, how about we get you on some, on a couple of chemicals to completely change the way your brain fires. And I could not have run away faster from that recommendation.
And how many other people do that, Aaron? How many? I mean, it doesn't matter what rank you are. How many people? How many people do that in the mental health community?
Well, it's not even just mental health. It's physical. Like when you talk about compartmentalizing, we all do that also with the physical side too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Not to take away from the mental side, but like I don't think about things like you talk to like Scott, right? And he's like, well, what about this? Like, does that hurt? I'm like, I don't know. I don't think about whether or not something hurts. Like I spent 20 years not thinking about it.
Convincing myself that I wasn't hurt, that I wasn't injured, that I wasn't sore, that I wasn't mentally failing, that I didn't have an alcohol problem. Right.
But you get somebody to be like, hey, can you actually feel your feet? I'm like, I don't know. Haven't thought about it.
Oh, I haven't yet. Oh, it's really weird that Scott, hilarious from Scott. He's like, hey, can you raise your shoulder over your head? And I was like, well, which one? And he was like, all right, listen here, idiot. So that's the fucking reason, Aaron. And I was just like, he's like, that's not normal. He was like, how much pain do you deal with every single day because of your injuries? And he goes, and I was like, I don't know, like a normal amount. He's like, Aaron, a normal amount is 0. Normal people don't have pain on a 4 every single day. That's not their baseline. Like half the time, Scott was just like, you fucking idiot. That's not normal. And I honestly, I needed it. Like,
but it's normal for us who've been in and again, self-medicated with the Motrin that the doc was giving us. And we're like, yeah, of course I can do that. I'm not going to, nobody can tell me I can't.
Right. God forbid you tell me I can't.
Exactly. So again, I say that because my psychological stressors are far different than Aaron's, than Trent's, than Peach's, than Will's, than Scott's, than anybody else's. They're mine. I can tell you that as a paralegal, here's something that I'm gonna pull it up on my screen here real quick because I heard this word on a recent retirement that I went to with a fellow paralegal, and apparently it's got a name. I never knew it had a name. Because
I think I know the word that you're about to say, and I'm excited. Does it start with an S?
Does it start with what?
Start with an S. Sierra.
No.
Oh, okay, go for it.
All right.
Hang on in here.
So I'm in a room with a bunch of paralegals because one of my paralegal mentees is finally retiring. She had a great career and she's moving on to the civilian sector. She's retiring as a chief. And I'm talking to these paralegals and this term comes up, and I literally had to come home and look it up. So one of the paralegals says, yeah, I'm pretty sure I suffer from vicarious trauma. I'm like, what? I've never heard that term. But when I went home and I looked it up, I'm going to read this because I think it's important to understand. Vicarious trauma is an occupational challenge for people working and volunteering in fields of victim services, law enforcement, emergency medical services, fire services, and other allied professions due to their continuous exposure to victims of trauma and violence. This work-related trauma exposure can occur from such experiences as listening to individual clients recount their victimization, looking at videos of exploited children, reviewing case files, hearing about or responding to the aftermath of violence and other traumatic events day after day, and responding to mass violence incidents that have resulted in numerous injuries and deaths. I can tell you as a paralegal, having sat through a court-martial on a shaken baby case, where a senior airman was so mad at its 6-month-old because she wouldn't stop crying, that he shook her to death. And to watch the expert witness that we had on the stand take a doll and shake it, so basically a 6-month-old doll, and shake it with the level of violence that needed to occur to inflict the injuries that the dead baby had incurred, is something I'll never forget.
Mm-hmm.
That I didn't know what it was, but it's vicarious trauma, because I saw the doctor shake this doll so violently that I almost wanted to throw up, and I certainly wanted to go across the freaking rail in front of me and choke that dude out that had shaken its baby. It's just, it's my trauma. It's the stuff that I have to deal with. The number of sexual assaults that I had to interview. I mean, I lost count of the number of victims I've had to sit through victim interviews on. So it's your own stuff. You can't compare yourself to the guy or gal next to you, because you don't know what they've been through. You have no idea what they've been through. So to say, well, Jim got 90%, why am I only getting 70%? Well, because you have no idea. Jim's probably only telling you part of the story,
Mm-hmm.
part that he wants you to know about. He's not telling you the rest.
Yeah. And vice versa. And, hey, Jim got 90%. His story is way worse than mine. I only got 70%. That's what I deserve. Those are those two sides of the same coin. And everybody listening right now for, vicarious trauma, do you know where dark humor comes in the military, in the medical career field, in these career fields where, sometimes you have to make a joke about it, because if you don't, you'll literally go insane with all of the things that you're exposed to and that you're expected to deal with. As a young man, I remember going through my clinicals in Philly, and it was the first time, I'd done a little EMT work beforehand, but small town, taking people to like dialysis appointments and stuff, right? Like nothing serious.
Right.
I distinctly remember the first time I had to tell the family that they were going to die. Man, I was a student. I didn't know how to tell somebody they just lost their dad, their brother, their father. I had no clue how to do that. And that stayed with, I remember that conversation crystal clear, to today. Like, it wasn't my dad, it wasn't my brother, but I worked on him and he died. And then I had to tell that family, because quite honestly, the little attending that was only, 21 years old and had zero life experience was like, hey, special operator kid, you want to tell this guy that I assume that you have experience with this. You want to tell him that this guy's dead?
Right.
And of course, me being who I am, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll fucking go have the talk with him. But that's a great description of vicarious trauma.
Yeah. And again, I didn't know that that's what it was called, but I knew that, my year with my psychologist, I went through all of the vicarious trauma that I had compartmentalized over the years. And it goes, to suicides, it goes to cases that I've worked, it goes to houses that I visited where children are in conditions that they should not be in. It's looking at child porn, because we've got, people in the United States Air Force who feel that that's something that they're into. But those are all
I'm really into wood chippers for those people, so that's tight. I'm glad we all have hobbies.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, again, those are things. And Amy would always ask me when I came home from a hard day's work as a paralegal. She's like, how did your day go? And we had this understanding. If I told her my day went fine, that means she doesn't ask me anymore. Because in that stage of the case, I'm not allowed to talk about it as a paralegal. I can talk about it with my attorneys. I can talk about it with the victims. I can talk about it with fellow paralegals, but I cannot bring that stuff home. So when I said fine, she was like, okay, but she knew I had stuff going on. And then finally, when the case was over and done with, and, it was squared away, she'd ask me how my day was, and I would it was like, this is the case that I've been dealing with for the last 6 months, a year, however long it was. And this is why I had so many days where I was just totally out of it, because I had to deal with this freaking madness. So again, when Pete had asked me about comparing, you're comparing apples to oranges. You have no idea what the guy that's telling you that they're at 40%, again, he's telling you part of the story. The guy that's telling you he's at 100% TNP, he's telling you part of the story. There's no way he's telling you everything, because it's just, I expect our clients to tell Scott everything, because he's going to advise you on what the regulations say, and tell you, again, where you need to put emphasis. If you can lift one shoulder higher than the other, there's a reason for that. And when you raise your hand, if you have to think about it, like, I'm not putting up my right arm because I can't raise it, that's an issue. And so again, it's just kind of walking people through those kinds of things, and getting them to understand that we all have our own issues that we're dealing with, physical, mental, what have you.
Yeah. Well, and and it has been great. And I know we were all talking about all the things that POVAT has provided for us, and Scott and you guys and everything. But now, as I am getting closer to like the end of the process, and it is my turn to put another name in the hat, like, exactly how does that go? Like, when I send them to you, like, what can they expect? What's the onus on me to do what? And then what should they start bringing to the table and understand about what it means to be referred to POVAT by one of us?
Right. So what we ask of you at Trent as a referrer, is basically, again, and I'm going to put this out here. We all know that there are people that probably shouldn't be rated where they're rated, because they're, quote unquote, chasing the almighty dollar. They want to be, set. And maybe they didn't have the exposure to the things that would get you to that amount. So they play the game. We don't want people who play games. We want people that are legitimately needing our assistance. And because we're a referral agency, we only get those individuals. That's what's beautiful about what we do, is we don't get the guy coming to us cold off the street corner saying, I think I need this, or I think I need that. We get a big brother or a big sister looking out for their fellow veterans saying, hey, these people helped me out, and I think you would do really good to talk to them for a little bit. So what we need from you, Trent, is basically, I'll send you essentially the 5 W's, the who, what, when, why, and where, kind of about your referral. And so what we want you to do is we want you to introduce that person to us via email, and, have a conversation with that individual beforehand. Say, hey, these are the 5 W's that POVAT's going to want, that POVAT wants going into this. And I'm going to make the introduction to you, to Lyle, and to Linda, and to Will. And so then you get on, email, and you shoot me an email with your, Joe Blow's, 5 W's, and say, hey, I'd like you to introduce you to Joe. He is one of my, fellow airmen, who needs assistance. And I'd really appreciate it if you could help him out. And based on those 5 W's is our jumping off point. Is, we look at those and we say, okay, he meets the criteria. He's been referred by an individual who's already been through the process, and yes, we will help him out. And then we start them in the process, and we reach directly back out to them, and we say, hey, these are the things that we need you to do. Here's an intake form. Fill out our intake form. Give us a little bit more in-depth information from the 5 W's. You fill out that intake form, and then once we have that, then we turn you into an active case. And once you turn into an active case, then we're going to ask you for your medical records. We're going to ask you for, if you're already a veteran, we want your DD 214. There are certain other documents that we're going to want. But the moment that Joe goes radio silent on us and doesn't want to participate, I call Trent and say, hey, you remember your buddy Joe? I don't know what's up with him,
Get
but
him. That's the first sergeant talking. That's like, hey, you better
he's
get your
on
boy.
radio silent on us, and I need you to engage. And that's
Nice.
that's what makes us good. It's because you're not going to refer someone who's not a hard charger, who doesn't want to do the right thing. You're going to refer the right people to us, and that's why we're so successful.
Well, and one of the things that, we're recently retired, so I have obviously still a bunch of buddies that are following me out the door, just like I followed other people out the door. At what point, how far out from retirement should I start getting these folks in touch with you? And I know it's probably case dependent. Like I probably needed to get in touch with y'all way before I did because I'm mostly not smart.
And who told you that, Trent? Who told you that for months? Yeah. Was it me and Peaches? Oh, it was me and Peaches. Oh, it was me in the process going, hey, Trent, you should have started earlier. I'm sorry. That's just a personal thing.
Scott's a very patient man. I'm just throwing it out.
Yes. And I will say, for full disclosure, Scott has not called me to tell me that you're an idiot. So that's good. Scott has not taken his time out to call me and be like, hey, Aaron, is Trent really functionally an idiot, or is he just playing a game?
Well, he got to know me and he says it to my face. So.
Right.
Good.
He's very good at, he spends a lot of his time on the phone talking to a lot of veterans. We say one vet at a time. But we want you to feel, Aaron, like you were the only vet that we were paying attention to. Same thing with you, Trent. We want you to feel like you're the only, you're our family. We want you to feel like you're the only vet we're paying attention to. And Scott does a very good job of doing that and spending the time with you on the phone and walking you through the regulations and things that you should be thinking about.
Yeah. So the question, if I have a buddy that's like a year and a half, 2 years out, like if I refer them, are you guys gonna be like, let's wait until we make this active?
I would tell you that this is the paralegal in me. It depends. And you're right. It depends on how many issues this person has. If you know they've got a lot of issues, that's going to take quite some time to get through, whether it be physical and or psychological or both. Then we need more time. But a year out is good. So 12 months out is good. It's workable. We can start building, again, it's going to be on that individual to go to their PCM, to go to their mental health provider, to go to the appointments, to get the information documented. Because the thing that we're trying to do with the benefits delivered on discharge is make sure that your records are squared away before you get out, while you have access to care. And so when you go into the flight doc or when you go into the mental health provider and you talk about these things, you talk about it coming from a place of knowledge and understanding about what you need to tell them to get the proper note added to your records, which the VA is then going to look at and say, yep, that makes sense. So I would tell you a year out is good. But if you got a lot of issues, like more than the average Joe, or you've been, hiding a lot of issues for a lot of years, you might need a little bit more time.
you wouldn't be transparent. Yeah. So, for reference on this one, I think I was referred about 9 months out from flash to bang. And I did have, I think I ended up claiming I had over 20 issues or something, 20 separate claims. They got approved, and there was a handful of others that they were like, oh, not service connected. I was like, well, that's weird. I did it on the job, but whatever, I'll take it. It was intense. Like you really do. And my med records were completely screwed up. I wasn't honest and open with really any of my caregivers about the injuries that I had, because personally I didn't want to be off the team. Yeah. I have a shoulder that's needed surgery for about 12 years. I have a torn labrum and a torn rotator cuff. I've never had it fixed. You know why? Because it's 7 months down, and I don't want to be off the mats, and I didn't want to be off the team. And now it's that left shoulder that, I'm one of those guys that doesn't oftentimes try to raise my left shoulder because it just doesn't work a whole lot. But, I was kind of that harder case, and Scott still found a way to make it happen in like 9 months, 8 months, which is crazy.
But he's a lot happier with me when I give him more time.
Exactly. Yes.
So right. He's like, wow, I can't believe you sent this guy to me. Like, I'm like, dude, he needs help now. I'm sorry. That's what it is.
And that was a true statement. I did need the help, and Scott was there for me, and he still made it happen. He did tell me I was an idiot though, and he was right. So.
And so again, I'm gonna throw one more thing out there, and it's again something that we at POVAT are trying to figure out, and I think something that me with my experience has a vested interest in, and that we are really, really good at helping out special operators, because Will and Scott walk the walk, they talk the talk, they understand it, and they understand not identifying issues you may have. And a lot of our referrals are special operators. What I know needs to be addressed from the amount of work that I did in the area are those who have suffered from sexual assault. And it's oftentimes the same mentality. Okay. I reported it. My command didn't do anything about it. I shut up. I went about my way. Okay. Or I didn't report it because I didn't want to be ostracized from the unit. Again, this is coming from a first sergeant who was with 2 flying units, and there were plenty of female loadmasters. Okay. So I know that there were issues that took place that were never reported. And those are tough cases to, number one, reopen so many years after the fact that they've happened to get addressed, because you are warranted a VA compensation and pension rating for that psychological stressor. So it's in the same kind of realm as the special operator community, who don't like to identify as having physical or mental health ailments. But those, sexual assault survivors, from my experience as a paralegal and Linda's experience as a paralegal, we'd really like to help them out. But it's oftentimes a more difficult road to go down than it is for you guys, who clearly are able to identify, what missions you were a part of that inflicted the harm on your bodies and on your psyche.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know. That's a hard thing to follow up. It's like, hey, that's you should definitely let somebody know. I have no experience with that, and it's awful, but you should definitely get something. But that's why you need someone too, right? Like, it's the same thing. You need someone to walk you through it, explain why it's important, and that you know this is the way the process works, and you have to say something to get something,
right.
or just to get recognized for the things that you've been through. So,
So I know we're going on 2 hours. I just got a couple more things, and then you can cut me off if you'd like.
Well, we're not going to. Trent has a heart out, so he's going to bounce, and you and I are going to figure it out. I had the most open schedule for today, so Trent, man, thanks, love you, bro. We'll see you next time.
Take care, Trent. Good meeting you.
Finally, get these two out of the way. You know what I mean, Lyle? Just two bros talking now. Thank goodness.
Now we're just chit chatting.
Now that's it. That's it.
So I will say that. Let me see, where was I in my notes? A couple of shout outs that I need to do specifically, because again, where Amy and I came on to POVAT in 2020 was in a place of helping Will get this thing off the ground, and making sure we're taking care of the people that need to be taken care of. And Amy and I, we ran hard for a year or so before, like I told you before, the accounting thing was like, we were doing this a lot, and we found an accountant in Matt Harris. The same thing happens, with technology, as you all struggled with your technology, first thing today.
Every day, baby.
Imagine, 2, 3 folks, having no experience with the World Wide Web and how it works and how that thing connects to the social media giants that are out there. Imagine trying to wade through that. And we did so. And Shauna Leal Markham, Will's daughter, was very, very helpful at the beginning in getting our social media footprint out there. I took some classes because I wanted to understand nonprofit management. So I got a certificate in nonprofit management. I redid the website based on a school project, honestly. And that stayed up for about a year. Yeah. And that stayed up for about a year. And then I was like, dude, that is so unprofessional. I need some help there. And so
it sucks to be in the space and look back at like when we look back at old, just everything, right? Because we do all this ourselves. So I'm hearing so many parallels, but it does hurt to look back and, you look at the first thumbnails you made, or you look at the first podcast that you did, or you hear the way that you talk to guests and you're like, oh my goodness, I am the worst at this. I don't ever want to look back.
Right.
And look at where I started.
Right. And so it's the same kind of thing. And when we all reach our limits, we kind of identified that to Will and Jeff and Mark and the board. And again, that's where the fundraising comes in, because we do have to pay for some things.
Yeah.
Myself, Amy, Will, of the entire board, we don't collect a paycheck from POVAT at all. Period. Dot. The only people that we pay are our consultants, and our social media experts and our website experts. So in the realm of website, the Studio 3 Enterprise took a look at my website and said, "Wow, Lyle, you did a great job for an amateur, but you need some help."
Sure. Right.
They probably didn't say that, but that's what I thought. And so the website that we have now is, courtesy of Studio 3 Enterprises, and they did an excellent job, and it's so much more professional than I could have ever dreamed of, and they did an excellent job. The social media marketing is at the time that we came on board with them, late in 2022, early of 23, we again had reached our limits of being able to post when we needed to post and be consistent about it. So we sought the help of, at the time named Calatrello Creatives. They have rebranded. They are now Maven Marketing. Maven and Marketing helps us out with all of our social media posts, and have done a marvelous job in all of our socials, to include Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So those guys really do deserve a shout out, and we would not be continuing to go forward and being able to raise the funds that we need to raise if it were not for those folks doing the heavy lifting in the technology space that Amy, I, or Will are not, versed in. So
Exactly. So, and I've got projectovat.org. I've got it pulled up right now. There's a big red donate button that's on the top there. So even if you're not a part of this, if you connect with it, if you like what Project One Vet at a Time is doing, go over to projectovat.org and use the donate button. Anything helps. Give $1, give $10, give $100, do whatever. One's ready in the team. We're going to make our own donations, and individually, because we are a part of this and we do love it. We owe you testimonials as well. So don't let me forget that. Keep us on track, and I'll own that. Is there any other way? You mentioned some other in-person events and some other things that you guys are running and you have on the horizon. So specifically about fundraising, is there another way that people can support if they're in the local area, or would you just prefer that they use the donate button?
So I think if you're on the website and you see the donate button, that's all well and good. But there's an upcoming events tab there as well. And if you go to the upcoming events, you'll see that the next event that we have is the Ironwood Golf Course in Sussex, Wisconsin, May 18th. I'm happy and thrilled to tell you that last year was the first year. And we filled up 18 holes with golfers. Ironwood Golf Course has 27 holes available, and we've filled up all 27 holes this year, with people who are interested in continuing to help us out. So where we have events in your area, they will show up in upcoming events. But the easiest way and the most impactful way is to donate.
Just via the donate button on the website, right?
Via the donate button on the website.
Yeah.
So
that's fantastic.
Yep.
Lyle Rosin, I think it took me 2 hours, an hour and 59 minutes to figure out how to say your last name correctly, and I still own that. We're getting close to the end here. I can't speak highly enough to say thank you. Of the project, obviously, as somebody that's gone through it, and it benefited me as one of those guys that got benefits upon my retirement. The ink on my orders wasn't even dry on that 214 before I had a letter from the VA that takes care of me and my young family for the rest of my life. I can't put that into terms where I'm grateful enough, but also for your service. As you went through a 30-year career as a chief master sergeant, and you answered that call again in 2019 and 2020 when you and Chief Markham, decided to get together and start this, not-for-profit. And for you to not take a paycheck, like, that's just a testament to your service. I quite frankly don't expect anything else from men of your caliber. Is there anything else you would like to hit about Project One Vet at a Time as we kind of close up here?
I like to hit on, as we close out, the family aspect of what we have going on. It's a very close-knit organization. Again, having met Linda back in the day. She was one of those paralegals who was our charger. And when she got ready to retire, I knew, much like me, she probably wasn't taking care of herself along the way because she was taking care of everybody else around her. First and foremost, we brought her into the project to get her benefits delivered on discharge. Of the 218 people that we have going through Project OVAT, just 10% of them are active duty. But I see that number moving up because it is so impactful for the remainder of their lives. It's an extremely important thing we're doing. I challenge other non-for-profits to be true non-for-profits and not get such big salaries and maybe taking care of more people. Because if I had any way to do it, I would definitely take care of more people. But the quality that we deliver to our clients, to our veterans, is extremely important, and the family environment that we have, and the ability for me to pick up the phone and talk to Scott, or go over to Will's house, or Amy and I to have conversations here, or to talk to Linda over the phone, or chat with her, or whatever the case might be. It is really a close-knit family, and something that we're extremely proud of. And something that we're even more proud of is introducing folks like you and Trent and Peaches to the family, and welcoming them in and letting them know that they're never going to be alone in this fight, that we will always be there with them. Again, as it may seem, if anything gets worse for you that you need for us to readdress, we certainly will. Patience is extremely important as a veteran. Patience is extremely important as an active duty member trying to get their benefits delivered on discharge. I can tell you that we have cases that we took on in 2020 that we are just now going in front of a VA judge on. So 4.5 years after we've taken on the case, we're still in the fight. We're still going to the hearings with our clients to make sure that they get what they've earned and deserve, because they shouldn't have to go it alone, and they shouldn't have to pay a dime for something that they've earned and deserved. So I appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to hearing from your referrals as they come in, and getting that testimonial from you so that we can use you as a shining example of what we can do for young folks like you who are making the transition to the civilian sector, because it's a huge transition, one that shouldn't be taken lightly. You guys are knocking it out of the park with One's Ready. So best of luck to you guys too.
Well, we appreciate it. And the only reason we exist is to bring awareness to folks like you. So, we are here to get the word about Project OVAT out. So go to projectovat.org and check out everything that they're doing. Check out the upcoming events tab for the May event, and then make sure to check out the donate tab and consider donating if you can. I'd highly recommend it. And I would say, probably as a piece of advice, don't use me as a shining example. Pick somebody better. Like, use Peaches. Everybody loves Peaches.
Everybody knows.
Probably.
Everybody loves. I'm calling him Peaches. It's just something about that.
It grows on you. On you. His last name's too hard to pronounce, and he becomes the peach after a little while. You're just like, oh, that's Peaches.
Rosin,
whatever. Call me whatever. You know what I mean? Exactly. Just don't call me late for dinner.
All right.
Lyle, brother, I appreciate it. Thanks for everything that you guys continue to do. Everybody else, go out there over to Project OVAT. So that's project1vetatime.org, and make sure you're donating, following what they do. And if you're an active duty service member and you think that you need a referral, man, hit us up in the DMs. We would love to talk to you about the goodness that they provide. Everybody else out there, train hard, have a good one. This is another edition of the One's Ready podcast in the books. See you next time.
Thanks, brother.